Welcome, everyone, to Brain, our week-long series of conversations and presentations by brain science researchers at the University of Minnesota. I'm Holly Menninger. I'm the Director of Public Engagement and Science Learning at the Bell Museum. The university is a real powerhouse in the field of brain science, and we at the Bell Museum are thrilled to collaborate with researchers and showcase their work. Over the course of this week on Facebook Live and later on recorded videos posted to our website, you'll meet researchers across all career levels in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, neuroscience, and neurology. You'll learn more about their work and even go inside research labs and equipment. Why are we so focused on brains? Well, this Thursday, tomorrow, October 15th, the Bell Museum debuts an original planetarium production called Mysteries of Your Brain. We'll be showcasing this new animated film all weekend long, and then it'll be shown daily as part of our regular schedule at 11:30 a.m. Before I introduce our special guest today, I'd like to thank Boston Scientific for their generous support of brain-related programs and activities at the museum. Okay, today you are in for a real treat. We are going to meet researchers who will take us inside a lab to do a brain scan in real time. Let me introduce our guests, who are all researchers with appointments in the university's neuroscience program, collaborating on a project looking at how people with schizophrenia see things differently than other people. So first, I'm gonna say all their names, and then we're gonna kind of meet them over the course of the day today. So first we have Dr. Michael Paul Shalmo, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry. He studies how vision works differently in people with mental disorders. Dr. Kim Weldon is a research scientist in the Department of Psychiatry, working with Michael Paul and Dr. Cheryl Olman, who I'm gonna introduce next. And so next, Dr. Cheryl Olman. She's an associate professor in the Department of Psychology who studies vision and uses computational models to simulate how brains see. She's been an incredible collaborator and a friend of the Bell Museum, helping to coordinate neuroscience outreach events over the last few years, and most recently serving as a science and content advisor for the new Mysteries of Your Brain planetarium production. If you visit the Bell starting this Thursday, do check out the new Amazing Animal Brains activity pod in the Touch and See lab, inspired by the work of Cheryl and her students. Okay, Cheryl, it's all you. Take it away.
All right. Hi. I am super excited to have a chance to show you brains, my brain, other people's brains. And I'm going to start introducing myself by introducing my dog, Banjo. So right now I'm sharing the screen with Banjo. And she is modeling one of our 3D printed animal brains. It's actually a wolf brain. Banjo likes to think of herself as a little more capable than she actually is. That's my dog Banjo modeling a wolf brain. And here's that little wolf brain. And here's that little wolf brain compared to Kim's brain. And so the wolf brain is not as big as Kim's brain, but the wolf and Kim are good at different things. But today we're studying human brains. And we're using MRI to study brains. And so I'm going to say like 2 minutes about what MRI has to do with understanding how the brain works. And then Kim's going to explain some more, and then Michael Paul is going to explain some more, and I'm not going to talk anymore because I'm going to go get in a really big magnet so they can scan my brain and see how it works. So if we pretend that this is my brain, there's this thing called the cerebellum that's like on the back of the brain. And it's really hard for you guys to see, but there's like this lump on the back. So go to the Bell Museum and play with our models of the brain. And in the brain, there are like 100 billion neurons, which are the cells that do the communicating and talking. A lot of those neurons are in that little tiny cerebellum, which we're not going to talk about anymore today. And like 20 billion of those neurons are in the big part of the brain on top, the cerebrum. So you have two hemispheres. And in each of those hemispheres, there's like 10 billion neurons. So that's kind of how many people there are in the whole planet. So I'm going to do this analogy between people and neurons now. So if you think of the whole planet as like 10 billion people, we're going to zoom in. So this is me wearing the brain. We're going to zoom in on the back of the brain, and we're going to zoom into this little part that processes my visual information. When we zoom in, we're going to be looking at like 8 million neurons. So that's kind of like New York City. So the game we're playing today, conceptually, is which movie does New York City like better? Does it like Kung Fu Panda 1 or Kung Fu Panda 2? I like Kung Fu Panda 1 better, except the fight scene at the end of Kung Fu Panda 2, my favorite of all three. But so if you're going to ask, does New York City like which movie better? You're going to like play the movie to New York City, but you're way zoomed out up in a satellite, and all you can measure is how much energy is being consumed in Queens. But you can measure that. And so then you can play Kung Fu Panda 1 and figure out how many people like it by how many people are watching it, and then play the other movie and see how many people like it by how many people are watching it. So by measuring how much energy some part of New York City uses, that's kind of like how we tell which part of the brain is doing what and what is better at and what kind of information it's using. So there's my story about Kung Fu Panda and New York City. I am now going to put in some earplugs to go get in the magnet because it's really loud. And I didn't tell anybody about this. I'm going to have a little snack before I get in the magnet because I'm really hungry. And if I'm hungry, my brain is hungry. And if my brain is hungry, it doesn't have the energy it needs to watch Kung Fu Panda. So here's Cheryl signing out. And Kim's got it from here. And I will see you over there.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Weldon. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the MRI machine. So MRI uses a really big magnet, like Cheryl said, and radio waves and a computer so that we can take different pictures of different areas of your body. And we are interested in brains today. So you know how TVs can come in lower resolution where you see a blurrier picture of a movie, and TVs can come in much higher resolution, high definition, where you can see much clearer pictures of the movie. Well, MRIs are similar, so they come in weaker magnets that take blurry pictures of your body and stronger magnets that take clearer pictures of your body. And since we're interested in a part of the brain that's very small, part of our work here is to improve MRI so that we can take better and better pictures and more easily figure out how the brain works. So I'm going to turn over the introductions to Michael Paul now.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And Michael Paul, maybe if you can unmute yourself, we may kind of kick back over to look at Cheryl getting inside the magnet as this is happening. But thank you both to Cheryl and Kim. Audience, stand by as we get Cheryl into the MRI machine. And I also want to point out, I forgot to let people know, we want to hear your questions. And so please use the comment section on Facebook Live to put your questions in, and our team behind the scenes will feed those questions to me and to our researchers so we can hear what you're curious about. So Michael Paul, why don't you reintroduce yourself to us for folks that may have tuned in a little bit late. Tell us about who you are, what you do, and why you're connected to how you're connected to this research group.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Paul Shalmo. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry. And I am connected to Cheryl and Kim through this research project that we're working on with a number of other people at the University of Minnesota. And the project is focused on understanding how people with schizophrenia or psychotic symptoms, so hallucinations and delusions, how these people see the world differently than people who don't experience those symptoms. And we're interested in vision. All of us study the visual system and the parts of the brain that respond to vision. And we're interested in how those parts of the brains are working differently in those people. And we use MRI to do that. We also do some behavioral tasks where we show people an image and we ask them to make some kind of simple judgment about the image. Is part of it brighter or stronger, weaker, things like that. We do that inside the scanner and outside the scanner. So today, Cheryl's going to be going in the scanner and looking at Kung Fu Panda, and her brain is going to be responding to those images. In our work, we present people images that are usually quite a bit more boring than that, usually black and white stripes. There's Cheryl. It looks like she's ready to go in.
Hi, Cheryl.
So Cheryl's got her earplugs in. She's ready to go into the scanner because it's quite loud. You can see there's the big scanner. It's in another room from the control room where the people sit who drive the scanner. And it's pretty loud in there when the scanner is running. And even when they're not taking images, the magnet is always on. So they have to be really safe when they go in there, make sure not to bring in any kind of metallic objects that would be attracted to that really big magnet. And you can maybe hear in the background, there's some noise of the magnet itself. And that's just kind of the magnet running and kind of continuing to stay super cooled. So inside the magnet, there's actually liquid helium, which keeps the magnetic elements super cooled. And if I stop talking, you might be able to hear kind of a ticking, hissing in the background. And that's the sound of what's called the cold head, which kind of keeps that helium super cooled and captures any of the helium that boils off. And when the scanner starts...
What are all the tubes and other things that that Kim was handing Cheryl? I know there's a thing to keep her head still, I'm sure, but what else? Yep. What was some of the other stuff that people are seeing?
Yeah, so she's got her head. Cheryl's head right now is in what's called a radio frequency head coil. That's the thing that actually sends and receives radio waves, and that's what actually allows us to take the picture that is in the MRI, the picture of the brain. So the big magnet kind of creates the right environment for those images to be created, and then that kind of paint can looking thing that her head is in is actually what's kind of sending and receiving the signals to make the images. Around the outside of it, there's a mirror, which is kind of on this kind of flexible, it's called lock line, this kind of flexible plastic tubing. And that mirror is allowing her to see the screen, which you can sort of see is just in the opening of the scanner behind her. There's a picture of it's mountains. It looks like she's ready to go in. And you'll see she'll start to move in there. So the mirror allows her to see the images that they're presenting. In this case, it's going to be the movie Kung Fu Panda is going to be presented on that screen behind her through a projector that's in another room.
Is there, besides liking Kung Fu Panda, as Cheryl clearly indicated in her introduction, having big feelings about it,
Yes.
Is that a film that you typically show your research subjects or have, or is that just a fun one to do for today?
Well, it's a fun one to do, but it's also something that Cheryl has used in her research previously, just as a kind of strong visual stimulus that's dynamic. There's lots of color, there's lots of motion, there's a lot to see, and it keeps your attention. So it's not the kind of stimulus that we're using in the project that we're collaborating on, which unfortunately those are quite a bit more boring. They're just kind of black and white stripes and things like that. But in this case, it's a good one to show the brain responding really strongly to an interesting image or set of images.
All right. Well, it looks like Cheryl's in.
Yes. So she's all the way in. They've closed the door. And then Kim is going to use that computer, series of computers that are there to actually control the scanner and cause it to take images of Cheryl's brain. And at some point, you'll probably be able to hear that making some noise.
I'm looking at some of the questions that came in, and one of the people watching, Dee, asked if the magnet can hurt your body at all, and maybe another question. I've never had an MRI, and I don't know if you've been a test subject in the machine as well. You might be able to answer Dee's question, and then also describe what does it feel like when you are inside there?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a few safety concerns that we have when doing an MRI. It is a very powerful magnet. So I think I mentioned earlier that you wouldn't want to bring anything in that was ferromagnetic, something like iron that could be attracted to the magnet, because that could, if it was attracted to the magnet strongly enough, it could come out of your hand and either damage the equipment or hurt someone in the room. So we screen people very carefully. You saw Cheryl wearing scrubs. We do that to make sure that people don't accidentally bring something into the room that could become dangerous. We also screen people for medical devices, things like a pacemaker, which could be damaged by the magnet, and then that would be a risk to that person's health. There are a number of different kind of medical devices and implanted devices that we screen for before doing MRIs. And there are some other safety concerns. Cheryl mentioned putting in earplugs. That's because the scanner is quite loud. We want to protect people's hearing and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, and this kind of related to your research. Can you tell if someone has a mental disorder by doing a brain scan and looking at their MRI images?
Yeah, that's a great question. So unfortunately, right now, we don't have a reliable, objective way of telling if someone has a mental disorder based on something like a brain scan or a test, a blood test, things like that. We would really like to do that. When I said the words reliable and objective. And those are important because we want something that always works consistently, it works for everybody who takes the test, and it tells us very precisely whether, yes or no, someone has a disorder. And we also want something that's objective, and that means that it doesn't depend on who's administering the test. It's just, the blood test or a brain scan or something like that. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now. And right now, diagnoses of mental disorders are made primarily based on interviews and discussions with the person and their family and the people who they know and live with, and kind of describing their symptoms and understanding kind of the history of their mental disorder or what they've been going through. And that works reasonably well for understanding the symptoms the person is going through, but it doesn't tell us exactly what's going on in the brain that's different. And that's what we would really like to know. And so that's kind of the big picture goal of a lot of the research in psychiatry and psychology, and certainly some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. That's great. I'm wondering if we should check in with Kim, if Kim has anything interesting to say or to show happening. Hi, Kim.
Hi. So the scan is happening right now, and if you want to, you can hear how loud it is. So that's why Cheryl is wearing earplugs, so that we protect her hearing while we take all the pictures of her brain. And the MRI doesn't take one single picture. It takes a series of pictures like slices of bread, and then we glue them together so that we can kind of see tiny pieces of the brain one at a time. So that's the noise that it's making while it's taking the pictures.
Awesome. That was super cool. Well, thank you. Maybe we'll get back to some images here shortly. I hope. Let's see what other kinds of questions that we have from our audience. So Michael Paul, Terry asks, can you tell the diseases of the eye or other diseases in the brain with an MRI? It's kind of like related to the other question, but I know since Cheryl was pointing out the region of the brain that's responsible for vision, it would be really interesting to know how particularly eye diseases related to vision might show up in images that you take of the brain.
Yeah, so generally the kinds of things that you can diagnose with an MRI are really serious injuries to the brain, or either things like strokes or things like serious traumatic head injuries that cause major disruption of the brain tissue. Those will show up on an MRI. And there are other ways to diagnose those as well. But you can't really tell, for example, what we're studying, which is people with schizophrenia. And these people often experience hallucinations. Sometimes they're visual hallucinations where they're seeing things that aren't there. You can't really tell that that's going on just by looking at the MRI scan, because most people's brains look pretty similar. There are some kind of subtle changes in the brain with some of these mental disorders, but for the most part, what an MRI can tell us is if there's some kind of major damage, some lesion, which is a fancy word for kind of a big hole or a big injury to the brain.
Very cool. We have a very specific question, and I hope I get it right. So this is where we're going to rely on your expertise. So somebody watching is scheduled to have an MRI next week and wants to know why gadolinium, I don't know what that is, maybe you do and can tell us what that is, why gadolinium works so well when you are looking for reasons for seizures. This person said that the tech didn't know, but thought you might.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. My guess is that they're referring to a contrast agent, which is an injection that you can give sometimes when taking a certain kind of MRI, not the one that Cheryl's doing, but other MRIs. Sometimes people get what's called a contrast agent injected, which is a chemical that makes the MRI scan work better. Kind of in simple terms, you can see more, you get bigger differences. Like Kim used the analogy of a TV earlier. If you imagine turning up the contrast on the TV so that so it's less gray, it's more black and white. That's sort of a similar idea, if that is in fact what they're referring to. We don't use that in my research or in the research that Kim and Cheryl and I are working on together. So I'm less familiar with that. It's less commonly used in psychiatry, but for looking for a seizure, often people want to know kind of what part of the brain is causing the seizure. So you might do a brain scan to look for that.
Cool. Hey, Kim, do you have anything exciting to share?
Yes, so we're done taking a picture of Cheryl's brain, so I'd like to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to transfer the video to this screen. Hopefully you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a picture of Cheryl's brain. So we can see this is the front of her head. You can see her nose here. This is her skull. And down here is her spinal cord. And this is her brain, the part of the body we're interested in. And like I said, the MRI takes pictures in slices. So we can kind of scroll through her brain from side to side. So here you can see her left eyeball. And then we see her nose. And then if we keep going, we can see her other eye out the other side. And these are the main structures of the brain that we can see from these pictures. We have the spine here. This area of the brain is the cerebellum, which is kind of responsible for balance. And then you see her brain matter here, and that it comes in different colors. So it's like darker, and then we've got gray and a lighter gray. And what's dark here is actually cerebral spinal fluid, which makes the brain nice and slippery, and water. And then the gray matter is where all the neurons are, which is what we're interested in.
So as part of your research, what are you making measurements of particular parts of the brain, or what are you looking for after you put someone in the scanner?
So this is just a picture of her brain as it is, but what we do is show her different pictures while she's in the scanner, and we can actually measure blood flow. Like Cheryl was saying, like measure the amount of energy in different parts of her brain while we show her different pictures. So we are looking in this area of the brain in the back that's responsible for vision, and seeing which parts of that have more energy when we show different pictures.
Yeah, so like a muscle, when you use a muscle, you get an increase of blood flow to bring in more oxygen. The brain sort of works the same way. When a certain part of your brain is more active, there is an increase in blood flow to that part of the brain. And since blood has iron in it, we can detect with the MRI changes in blood flow because of a change in the magnetic signal because of the iron in the blood. And the oxygen changes kind of how the blood signal looks on the MRI scan. So we can actually see brain areas responding based on a change in blood flow. So someone uses their visual cortex more, they're seeing something really strong, intense visual image, there's more blood flow, there's a change in the magnetic signal, and that we can actually look for those changes and kind of compare them Does the brain respond more to image number 1 or image number 2? Does it like Kung Fu Panda 1 or Kung Fu Panda 2?
That's great. Thanks for that great explanation. We have another question that's come in that is asking, when there is damage to the brain from injury and the MRI shows non-functioning in areas, do you start to see other areas of the brain begin to function in its place?
You definitely can see that. You see that the most often when someone is born, for example, if someone is born blind and they never have any vision, or if they lose their visual perception very early in their life, then the part of the brain that we're talking about, the visual cortex that Kim and Cheryl have pointed out, can take over some other functions. So there is some MRI research that shows that that visual part of the brain in people that are born blind or become blind very early in life can respond to other things instead of vision. It can respond, for example, to touch. And a lot of people who are born blind or who have very low vision use touch, for example, for braille reading. So that becomes very important. And there is some MRI research showing that, yes, that those areas that normally in most people are responding to vision can respond to other sensory inputs like touch.
Awesome. Very cool. I want to be mindful of time and your time and our audience's time. And I didn't know if Michael, Paul, and Kim, if you have any sort of parting thoughts that you want to share with our audience, or if you want to point folks to any resources or places they can go to learn more about the work that you're doing.
Certainly, yeah. So there's information on the website for both the Department of Psychiatry, which I'm in, the Department of Psychology, which Cheryl is in, about learning more about the research that's going on at the university and the kind of work that we're doing and other people are doing. There's also information about how to get involved in research if people are interested in learning about that. And I would just thank everybody for their interest and for their attention today.
Yes, and I just want to echo Michael, Paul, and thank everyone for tuning in and for their interest in finding out more about what we do and how MRIs work and how we can investigate how the brain works.
Awesome. And Cheryl's okay in there? She's still in.
She's doing great.
Since we won't see her. Well, thank you both to Cheryl and to Kim and to Michael, Paul, and thank you to our audience for joining us this morning for Brain to Brain. Special thanks again to Boston Scientific for their support of brain-related programs and activities at the Bell Museum. We hope you can come back and join us again this afternoon at 4 o'clock for a conversation with Dr. Uzma Samadani to learn more about robotic technology being used to diagnose and treat brain injuries. We've posted a link to the entire Brain to Brain schedule of live programs in the comments box below. We hope you all have a wonderful day. Take good care.